Where are you signing? It's weird that there wasn't one in your box there. I saw you on the highway.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was neat.
You good?
30 seconds. We're good.
No, we're going now. Oh, we're streaming, so.
Yeah.
All right, let's call this meeting to order. So, at this point, we've got everybody here. We'll open the public forum. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say? I think you guys are all on the agenda or representing people on the agenda. So, with that said, let's move along. All right, so first thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. So same 3 items as normal, unless there's something that you'd like to pull for a deliberation. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Motion. Is there a second?
I think I'm gonna second this one.
He's going to second that one? Well, it's very good. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Carries. All right, moving along to the Public Works Facility Project update. So, John, let us know what we got.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick update on the Public Works building. For the interior, we have permanent power into the building right now. We should finish sheetrocking today or tomorrow or Monday. We're going to start taping this week and continue into next week. Mechanical electrical rough-in is approximately 70%. Tile will start midweek next week for the tile walls, and that should take about a week and a half. Flooring will follow the tile, so I think it's the week of the 16th. The epoxy floor in the office area and the bathrooms will be installed, and we'll start painting next week. So, and then exterior grading will continue next week, since this week was a little wet. Yes. And we're scheduled for the next lift of asphalt, or the final coat will be the week of the 9th. And the cold storage building is going to be delivered this week, and installation will follow the next few weeks.
Nice. And it's a modular building that will just
Yep.
go up. Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Super. I went up there the other day. I think it was on Monday, and looked around. And there's a lot of buzzing going on inside with all of the construction, like he was saying, like the sheetrocking and all the infrastructure being put into place. The pavement's pretty much all done, which is awesome. I mean, the next lift is going to be like the surface. Like
Yeah, the
surface
final
of-
coat,
final
or
coat.
the wear course.
Yeah.
So it'll be a little bit nicer. You know, it's still a little rough on the base coat.
Yeah.
So
But it's looking pretty cool. So you should go up and check it out. I did have a couple people ask about if we're going to do an open house, and I think that we should wait until we get all the equipment in there before we do that. Or maybe something, I don't know. I don't know how long it'll take us to move in, but
Yeah, get ready.
So, and I forgot to mention that the fascia and soffit had started this week, and as soon as they get on the fascia on the low ends, they'll start actually installing the roof.
cool.
So all the material is here on site.
I understand Bruce said pretty soon he'll have some more buildings out of the way, so we'll even see it better.
I think so.
Yeah,
You might have noticed the restaurant building disappeared.
It did move,
Mhm.
which is pretty exciting. Yeah. Cool. You guys have any questions for?
That's great. Good work, John. Keep it up.
Yeah.
not
So
done
as
yet.
far as schedule is concerned, still pretty much on
Schedule,
schedule?
I think planned move-in date was the 27th. I think with the concrete, that took an extra week and a half. We're probably going to go into that next week. But I don't foresee you guys not be able to start moving in last week in October.
Right. So it'll just be detail work. that's
It's going to be
done.
detail work, finishing up this, and this. So, and probably some punch list items, and probably we'll be doing balancing of the mechanical systems, the air handling system, and the in-floor heat system.
Cool. That's great.
No one can wear shoes in there. You got to take them off in
my
the front.
Yeah, that's not that kind of building.
We're gonna drive in it quite a bit, so.
Yeah. There's some big stinky cars in there. So.
The guys are already talking about how much fun it's gonna be to sweep that floor.
Just need to get a pretty good vacuum.
We will think about
Backpack
that.
blower.
Backpack car. Yeah, that'd be terrible in there. It'd be like a cyclone. Anyway, so any questions about the update? No questions. Well, so the next thing we have is we have the consideration for the payment of number 3. So in your packet, you'd see the total amount for this payment that's due is, if I'm reading this right, $685,349. And that is, the balance of that has to do with the concrete work and other landscaping and such that happened around the building. Basically, the stuff that happened since the last time we issued a payment. So, so that is the current payment on the board. We need to approve that payment so that we can get that dispersed. So, if anybody has any questions about the bills, you'll find a list of the bills in the or the waivers for payment listed out in your packet. If anyone would like to talk about those, we certainly can talk about any of them individually, or I would entertain a motion to approve the payment number 3 made to McGough Construction.
I'll make a motion to approve payment number 3 to McGough Construction.
All right, there's our motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I have just one question as far as looking at the budget. I see on the list that we have here that the balance, the remaining balance, see my screen doesn't tip. The remaining balance to finish is still in the, hey, look at that, is in the $2 million range. Is that because we haven't paid the $600,000 as well?
I do not know.
Oh, okay.
You'd have to talk to, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me,
Right,
so
well,
I
there
really
you go.
can't.
Yeah, $2.6 million. It's just simple math. It's the 4.69 million that was the current contract amount. That's what we agreed to as our maximum, guaranteed maximum price, minus the total payments, including this payment. We're not anticipating that the remainder of the project is going to cost $2.6 million.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah. No, actually, it sounds like you weren't at the meeting this week, but Eric and Jim were working on an update on the actual
Yeah.
thing, and I don't know if they...
He said I would have it by the end of the week.
Yeah, so...
So this spreadsheet, they showed us a version of it earlier in the project where they were putting in the actual contract amounts with the subs. This one has the initial estimates, not the actual contract amount with the subs. So I think that we're going to have a better idea of what the total project cost is going to be probably next week.
Cool. That's great. So we have a motion and a second for the approval of payment number 3. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right.
Thank-
We'll look forward to touching base with you again.
Sounds good. Please do.
Yeah.
Thanks, have a good week,
Thanks, John.
everyone.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Planning Commission has the second reading of ordinance 2017-02. That's growth. I see, I always second guess myself. The first time I said it wrong, and then I was, anyway. So, we have this, this ordinance to rezone in our packet. There it is. And we were talking about rezoning a chunk from the CI service commercial industrial to the R1 permanent residential as we discussed last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the second reading of ordinance number 2017-2, or would you rather talk about it a little bit beforehand?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second, great. Any discussion? I did have a conversation with one of the commercial people, landowners that are adjacent to the property, that currently do operate commercial, and they were a little bit nervous about the rezoning of a chunk right in the middle there, because they actually do commercial stuff, and they need to make sure that they can continue to do commercial stuff on the property that they've invested in. And I told them that no changes will be made without talking with and engaging with the landowners around that. You know, because we had talked about potentially, is it appropriate to rezone that entire area R1 because of the new gunfront going through there and all the other changes that we're making in that area. So I don't think that, it's just something to be aware of, that the other commercial owners in that area are, they're noticing. And we have to make sure that there is still use for that, commercial use in that, or commercial industrial use in that area. So, that's it. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Thank you.
Yay, thank
you.
you.
Good luck.
See you later.
All right, so the next thing we have the Cook County Historical Society. So you guys may as well come up and take a microphone.
Okay.
And you're just gonna sit there? You're not gonna come up?
Come on, Darla. I'm good. She's doing all the talking.
That's good. You can just sit there and smile.
Moral support.
Yeah, it's always good to have two people.
Right.
You know, it's-
And you never know if you will have something to say or not.
And then you'll have the microphone.
All right, so we have in front of us a proposal from Richard Gilliard, who's the architect for the Historical Society, for some proposal for doing some plans regarding to some future projects for the Historical Society. So with that said, I'll let you take it away and introduce it so I don't murder it, and then we can have a discussion from there.
Sure, thank you. We are proposing, we're planning or we're thinking about a project that would be kind of a maritime museum. It may also be connected to the Coast Guard site, which is potentially going to be up for disposal from the federal government. And as I noted in the memo, we acquired a pretty extensive collection of maritime artifacts from David Hammer, a longtime Hovland family. The Hammer family were commercial and charter fishermen and have a pretty legendary story in their past with losing a family member to the lake and a heroic rescue attempt by Helmer Optic, for those of you who know the story. Just a really important part of Cook County history, so we quickly said, yes, we want this collection. It consists of up to 7 wooden boats, and I say up to because we haven't necessarily decided that we're taking all of these artifacts yet. So that, in combination with the fact that the Coast Guard is looking to find another headquarters, and that's a wonderful historic property that's all part of Grand Marais history, we thought, okay, let's go forward with some planning and see what we can come up with. And so we've been to the park board a couple of times and talked with them about potential sites over in the park area, and kind of got directed back over, well, maybe Boulder Park for this conversation. And so there's a lot of pieces and parts moving here, and we thought it's time to get somebody in who can help us do some planning. And so we worked with Richard Gilliard before, with some long-range site plans for our other historic sites. He's a good friend of the Historical Society. So we went to him naturally and said, what can you help us do? In this whole conversation, and I suppose it started in our talks with the park, this idea that the city's looking for restrooms and potential gathering spaces, or whatever we're going to call, events pavilions, or, different things have been thrown around. How do we include this in the conversation? And so that's why you find us here, to try to figure out if we can do something that could be mutually beneficial to what the city's looking for with their goals, something that honors the history of Grand Marais, which is obviously based on maritime history, and just kind of start there, see what we can do, what kind of vision we can put together. And I think Dick put together a nice proposal. He brought in a friend of his who's a landscape architect, which seems completely logical. when we're talking about kind of a swath of land and we're not quite sure what pieces and parts go together and how the outdoor space would be. So I'm excited that he brought Bruce Jacobson into this proposal. And what we're coming here to the city council is just to ask if you would be willing to share in the costs of that visioning process and see what we can do to partner. Okay. Oh, and the price and the cost. And I assume, I know it just came in this week, that everybody had a chance to peek. The fee that Dick is proposing is a $15,000 fee for some pretty extensive work that would tap into a lot of community process as well. We know certainly we're talking about the point, we're talking about a really important piece of Grand Marais real estate, if you will, and the Coast Guard station. And so we know there's going to be a lot of interest from the community of what's going on. And so we want to make sure to gather all that up right up front. And so that's worked into his proposal. And then ultimately what would be delivered on the other end, I think would be a couple of concepts. Not knowing for sure what's happening with the Coast Guard station, I think, in my opinion, having a concept that includes the Coast Guard station as part of it and maybe one that doesn't, something like that, but that's all stuff that can be worked out through this process. I think you'd start with a few rougher concepts and then whittle them down into at least one or two, depending on what we were looking for.
Anybody have any comments? Any thoughts?
What?
Discussion?
There was the Coast Guard station has been mentioned a number of times previous to this, and I was just wondering if there's been any headway in that conversation. It sounds like that's quite a process to transfer that, and it sounds great.
That process, yeah, that process is it's kind of a long one. They have to be ready to get rid of the property first, so they have to find what their next arrangement is going to be before they make any steps to get rid of the property. So there will definitely be some overlap between the Coast Guard having a new headquarters and then the handing over of the property. But I don't think it has to be terribly long, depending on how we get ourselves lined up for that. In the conversations that I've had with them about that. about
They
the
want
Coast Guard.
property here, just something different?
So just as a reminder, what the Coast Guard needs to be able to not use that property anymore is suitable housing for the people that are stationed here. And of course, housing is something that we have a difficult time finding for people, so that might be a bit of a challenge. If there's anyone who wants to know more about that, because you might have suitable housing for them, we can get into some more of the details. But basically, they're just looking for apartments that are close enough that they can have their folks respond.
So they aren't looking for dock space or building
Well,
I imagine they'll need dock
equipment? What do
space
they?
too, but we can probably figure that one out easier than housing.
So they don't really need any kind of work building by the lake?
That wasn't part of the original conversation. Like, part of the original conversation was having they were even looking for potentially a home, like a home that would have enough rooms to house the rotating staff that goes through there, facilities that were appropriate for the storage of military weapons, because they're a military unit. Like, they have to have a safe to be
I
able
get
to
that, but you
store
just
that.
said a home, and then thinking in a residential district.
Well, I mean,
No, it's
they were saying-
definitely a residential district idea, and when we're talking about
Yeah.
weapons, we're talking about no different than any hunter might have.
Right.
Oh.
It's just a matter of a lockable closet.
Yes.
Oh, it's a little different.
That's
than-
secure. That's secure all the way around.
No
Like,
nuclear
you can't
weapons.
stick your hand.
Yeah. Anything
Are there
bigger.
any
Got it.
weapons of mass destruction?
I don't know if the Coast Guard deals in weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, well, maybe I don't. But so anyways, as far as headway, that's maybe not a conversation that you've been a part of, and more, it sounds like Jay.
No, they've definitely.
They've definitely been
So-
a part of it.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and it's a process, there's no question.
Yeah.
They have to go through, like they're saying, they have to identify a new location and then, plan on declaring their property surplus. After they've done that, and that's not a small step, obviously, then it goes to the GSA, the General Services Administration, and then they go through the process of going through the deed, and there is a little bit of a hang-up in the deed. that goes back to the 20s that says that it would revert back to the original owner. So there's, there's potential sticking spots. The original owner is a corporation that doesn't exist anymore. How does that all, so that could take time and lawyers and so forth, but on their end, thankfully, and not something we would deal with. It would get through the GSA then. And then there's another process of, going through federal agencies, state agencies, and down to the local level. But we, as the Historical Society, have submitted a letter expressing our interests, and I think having, a community process where we create a concept for something really great that honors the history of the Coast Guard would probably go a long way. But there's a lot of pieces in between.
And then I don't remember, it sounded flexible before, like at the park board meetings, but I don't remember if there, and maybe things have changed, if there's a timeline for the hammer collection needing to be housed or developed.
No.
Okay.
The short answer is no. We spent this summer, we purchased a storage container, a shipping container,
Oh, yeah.
and cataloged the collection, so got it out of his fish house, so he's freed up. We've got a container that it's stored in that, at this point,
Great,
is good.
great. Well, that's,
But it's not a great way to
Store
showcase
or store
a collection.
artifacts.
Yeah.
it's just really good to hear, though, that we have some flexibility with the design process, and there's not like, we got to get this done, and the Coast Guard station might be perfect, but it's a long ways out, and, all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to know more about it.
I'm with you on that, yeah.
Thank you.
How practical, for as wonderful as it sounds, how practical is the Coast Guard building for something like the Historical Society to take on, considering renovations and maintenance and just the whole cost of something like that?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I mean, the fact that it's a historic building and on the National Register obviously makes grant opportunities specifically for the Historical Society just a lot more abundant. And we're definitely talking about, it all depends on what the partnership we have together is and what you're looking for and what we're looking for. But we look to it as a potential way to maybe earn income ultimately, but there's a lot of renovations and so forth in between here and there. So it's a great question. It's something I think we definitely have to consider.
And there's nothing practical about that piece of property. It's going to be a bear for somebody to take on. And it's just because it's as iconic as it is that we're going to have to do it. So, just not sure who we is yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sticky point.
So with regard to the scope of this proposal, you're talking about the Coast Guard station, but there was also mention of Boulder Park. Are there other areas too that would be considered as part of this? I mean, the parking area between Boulder Park and Artist Point?
Well-
I mean, you have the fish house over in the rec park. And does that get incorporated into the considerations? It seemed a little sketchy in terms of what the scope of the area being considered by this.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think obviously it's city property from Boulder Park to the Coast Guard station. So, and my understanding is there's not necessarily any planning that's gone on for that property. And so, yeah, I think I purposely left it open to see what would be the ideal, use and planning for that. And bringing up the fish house, I do think personally, and again, this all comes back to planning, I think the fish house would be perfect in the scope of this project, as well as the Niji. I mean, it would all fit together very nicely, but how, in space that works exactly, I don't know. But I would think if there hadn't been planning for, from Boulder Park through the Coast Guard station, that all should kind of be up for conversation when it involves planning for this and see what would be ideal. Obviously, parking is always going to be important down there, but yeah.
When-
Open space is also,
Yeah.
I think, very important. I hate to see more and more of it get built up.
Barb will agree with you for sure, and I think we're all in agreement. I don't think we want to have anything that blocks views, and it's such a wonderful natural formation that you don't want to detract from that as well, so.
Is when you're talking about, about all of the, like, putting together ideas and getting everything put together, I have I might take slight issue with like the way that this is written in specific to the way that I view, like, the way that the Coast Guard, what we decide what happens with the Coast Guard station. Because if you look, on phase one, you've got the discovery, and then you've got convene and engage, and when we're talking about the ideas for what could be put together there, like the list. I mean, and I understand that this is the Historical Society putting this together. The list of the 5 bullet points that you've got there that talk about ideas and analysis coming from engaging these stakeholders. I would dare say that I believe that the property is significant enough that we need to have that engagement process be open to the entire community before we actually decide whether or not we're going to have this be a Historical Society project or anything like that. I think that it's pretty fair to say that the Historical Society will be involved with whatever happens with Coast Guard Point because of its position on the National Register, and in the role that the Historical Society has played in the past for the community to help save the some of these older structures that are not being used. How did you put it in this thing? Not being used to their appropriate opportunity or something, or their appropriate. I can't remember. I thought that he put that really well. Not being used to their appropriate potential. I think that's the way that he put it. So that's like what I'm hearing, what you're saying, and what I read in this is that the Historical Society wants to put together and wants the city to help sponsor putting together a list of ideas for how the Historical Society can use that building.
And the city. And I think of it as a community input. I mean, I recognize that the first phase is more focused, although it certainly brings in community residents, business community, and others. Yeah, but I don't see it as just as exclusively Historical Society by any stretch of the imagination. Whatever, we're specifically looking at the idea that the city has these goals of restrooms and public gathering spaces, so that's certainly part of what we're thinking of. But opening it up to see what else. We've recognized that we're not the only ones who've had ideas about what happens with the Coast Guard station.
I'm sure there's no shortage of people who have had ideas.
Right, so we
of what
might as
can
well
be done.
get them all out there. And that's my thinking. But our primary purpose, obviously, is to share the history with the maritime artifacts and story that we have to tell, and to preserve the Coast Guard building. And no matter who's involved, that'll be our primary mission.
With the Hammer collection and the other maritime pieces that you have that would be included in such a museum, have you done any kind of analysis of what kind of square footage you would need for something like that?
That would be part of this process.
Ah.
That would be part of it. We have to define the scope of what story are we telling. I mean, the Hammer collection goes beyond a maritime story because it includes the home life that was required. I mean, the scope has not been defined, no, but that's part of this process.
And I think that gets back to Tracy's question about what you're taking on, and I think there has to be some give and take and some negotiation that you'll be thinking about as well. Yeah, you could build a massive, giant building that could house everything and have everything you'd want, but how would you ever operate it? And so there'll be some... You'll be able to answer that question of how many votes you'll be willing to take after you get an idea of what a building might look like and what it would take to operate it.
I guess the other thing would be, what can you retrofit the existing buildings for use, and what type of use you can use them for?
So now we're kind of getting 2 main points, maybe more than 2, because one of them is specifically that question you just asked. Well, what could you retrofit those existing Coast Guard buildings for? One of them is where might be the best place for the Hammer collection to be housed and what might it look like. But a whole other one is, what is the community's desire for all of these public spaces? So which one are we doing here? Or which two maybe? I don't know. I'm starting to get a little lost in that, because I think that last one that you're talking about, Jay, is a pretty big question.
And yeah, it's intimidating. It's a really intimidating question.
And,
to
yeah, and I'm not
take on.
opposed to, you know, doing this much work on a specific idea, even not knowing what the grand vision is, because it'll be really hard to develop a grand vision without having done work like this on a few specific ideas. But it does get to be, I mean, that's an incredibly important piece of property, and if we did learn anything specific in our community visioning about that property, it's about the iconicness of it. I mean, we didn't learn it, we knew this already, but if people told us anything, it was that, how important that is to the community.
And I think that the importance is that exterior appearance and the setting that's there. I mean, my guess is that there's most people have not been in that building to understand
Well, I'm
actually.
Sure, that's
No one's been in that building.
Oh, I have been in that building quite a bit as a child.
As a child, yes. Many
I mean,
years
it
ago.
was
Well-
offices and barracks and.
No, there's
yeah.
families living there,
Yeah.
including classmates of mine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
families.
yeah, I've spent time in there.
You know, the question gets to be is how much would it cost and what would be the interest in trying to rehab that interior space to something that's functional in today's world. I mean, obviously, the issue of handicap access is significant, and how do you deal with that in a historic building? Just getting in that front door
Yeah.
requires handicap accessibility, and
I was just down at Split Rock today, and for the house bonding tour, and you know, one of the homes that's there, they had to completely redo one of the entrances so that they could make it handicap accessible. You know, because that's not the way they were built.
And just to add to that, Dick Gilliard spent a lot of his career working on historic courthouses and bringing them up to code. You know, so we're in good hands as far as that goes with him. But yeah, and it's certainly allowed with historic buildings to do that kind of
So
thing.
you can answer one of the questions on that regard to Mr. Gilliard. Because that was part of what made me nervous about this proposal, was that it looked like, you know, you're bringing in an architect that you've worked with on projects that you've done in the past to help design, you know, the future of the Coast Guard Point building, you know, through the lens of the Historical Society, which is nothing wrong with that. But I feel like that might be cart before the horse, you know, where we're at right now. Like, we haven't even gotten confirmation from the Coast Guard that they're ready to get rid of it, or that they're interested in getting rid of it. But the, like, is this proposal with Mr. Gilliard, is it to create an estimation of how much renovations would cost, or is it to actually create plans for how things would be done? Because, you know, because both those things, I mean, would be incredibly useful, but they go in very different directions, you know? Like if he's going to create, like, this is how we're going to house all the Hammer Collection stuff, you know, and how much it would cost, versus this is how much it would cost to just get the place up to a reasonable, like, operating place, you know, because it's got a lot of, you know, mechanical problems to it, the
I don't-
building itself.
What I see is I mean, if he's asking for $15,000, I mean, that's not anywhere near what it's gonna cost to start looking at those things. I mean, we're 30,000 feet, we're not looking at mechanics.
We're talking visioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a visioning process. I mean, that's all this is, and to me, and that's what I'm taking out of when I read his RFP, or his proposal. Are you asking us for $15,000?
75.
For half.
Yeah. Was that the back part? Did I miss that part?
It was in the
Oh, that's
yeah.
why I missed it.
And so, in my
I missed it
take
too,
on
and I
that,
read the email.
my take on that, and you know, and I'm, you know, this is totally up for conversation. You know, I'm just throwing all this stuff out there. My take on it is that if we're going to invest city money into looking at the future of that project, or that that property, then we should do so, you know, just as a full community engagement, and not have it be, you know, and have the Historical Society at the table, have all the major players in the community at the table, so that we can gather, like, all of the 20,000 different ideas that people have for how that property should be used, because there's so many different ideas. And then if we did that, then we would actually be able to start going through and vetting those different ideas and seeing where there's similarities and where there are compatibilities, and trying to figure out what's the best for the community and for the organizations that are proposing them.
Pretty sure
I
that's what
think
he's.
that's what he's
Yeah.
saying he's gonna
Yeah.
do. I
Right.
mean,
That's exactly.
to me, that's what I mean, you know, I mean, so, or we can say, okay, we can be more specific that we would encourage, you know, I mean, I don't know,
Yeah,
I don't-
and a lot
are
of,
you
I'm saying a
envisioning,
lot
like-
of this stuff because I need to know.
Well, that's
So
where I
we're getting
get
at-
back to that, which direction are we going? Because I feel like when we started this conversation, it was about, let's put a master plan together for how the Hammer collection is going to be dealt with, and how the other cities' needs, like public restrooms or whatever else we decide we want to be involved in, how that's going to be dealt with. And it might be at Coast Guard, or it might be somewhere else. But that's a completely different process than, let's open up this entire piece of property to a public visioning and see which ideas we decide we want to do, which could be, we don't want anything there, or it could be, we want 6 things there, or we would answer the question, which piece of this are we interested in working with the Historical Society on? And that's not the direction we've gone. The direction we've gone is, well, the Historical Society has an idea and they want us as a partner, and we have some needs, and so let's see if there's a match. That's not the grand, open, community visioning, master plan the entire piece of property.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm identifying. Like, I want clarity on is you know, if the Historical Society is going to do this, you know, an engagement process to figure out the future of that, and to include all the stakeholders from the entire community, you know, that's one thing. I guess I'm not clear on what the whole scope of it is.
I don't see these things as divergent as you guys are looking at them. I think we have our interests, but obviously we recognize the city has their interests, and we wanted to start bringing those things together. But we also recognize that the community has its interests, and we're talking about a lot of important property potentially. And so I don't see them as divergent. We are going to represent our interests in a community process. The city will obviously represent their interests in a community process, but we can't close the door and go, well, those are all the interests at play, because we know very well they're not. So I see it as a visioning process for the community, but initiated by the Historical Society and the city, who have previously stated interest initiating those projects. I don't quite see them as divergent.
So here's where they might be divergent. Is Dick going to draw a master plan for somebody else other than the two of us in that building?
No, but certainly if other concepts that, you know, and different uses come in, the Historical Society, I can't imagine that we could use all of that property. You know, we recognize there's lots of potential uses, so I think those uses will come in, but they would have to complement whatever the city and the Historical Society were interested in. So no, certainly he's not going to draw a plan for someone entirely different, but he might incorporate different uses and programs that incorporate whatever community needs there are. So, yeah.
Your written text sounds very broad. It's just verbally, it sounded more specific and.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. I wasn't confused. The
Wait.
verbal didn't confuse me. I read this and I was like, okay, well, that sounds pretty like a vision process. Sounds.
But it's not going to be, I mean, just the way $15,000 doesn't pay for a thorough examination of that building, it doesn't pay for a thorough vetting of a public, of that kind of an important piece of property.
Oh, I just thought
going
we're
through a master
getting
plan.
a deal, is what I thought.
Maybe we. I also don't think, though, that we have to do these in any particular order. Going through this process and developing some concepts at a $15,000 level for what we want to do with this project can be done before we master plan, and then can be adjusted to what the master planning says.
And
So that we can definitely do
help
some.
the master plan,
it would-
like
yeah.
gathers information
You
is a
can't
large
just-
part of this.
You can't really do a good master plan without some people with some developed ideas coming to the table.
Well, I mean, if it's $15,000, it's saying it's up to 300 hours, that's $50 an hour. I mean, that's,
Well, and
there
Dick
is a
is-
deal. I mean,
Dick is,
you're right, I
Dick
mean,
has
like,
given,
that's-
Yeah.
Dick has always, you know, he's a friend of the Historical Society.
Right, that's
He's
all I'm
always-
saying is
He's
that
always
it's-
been really fair with the Historical Society and working on stuff.
And whereas there are probably many ideas about what to do with that building, I would it might be a big assumption, but I would assume that everyone would be about preserving it, at least that,
That's a huge assumption.
wow.
I would
wow.
not assume that.
That's a big assumption, but we also have to keep in mind that.
It's
you
like,
know,
well, we might get rid of the lighthouse. I mean, I
Well-
think we could assume that,
well, we
that,
can't
I
get rid
mean,
of the lighthouse because that's
Well,
still
right,
a
but-
navigational point.
but I mean, I tied it, I think of them as very similar.
Right.
It's as iconic as the lighthouse in my mind, and maybe people are free to disagree, but my point is that I think the vast majority of people would say we should preserve this somehow.
Well,
But the details of that, which this might flesh out more so, or else get us a better idea, you know, is maybe where there's discrepancies, so.
Another example for the use of that property is there's the group, the creative economy group that's working is you know they've recently gathered $25,000 of their own money and grant money to do an art space feasibility study for properties in the community for where we could have artist lived workspace, which would help with the housing issue and in empowering local artists to be economically and independent. And one of the properties that came up in that conversation was Coast Guard Point. So we're going to have in November the art space group coming up here and basically doing the same thing for that building and other buildings around the community. So like that, this is an interesting arrangement because you're asking us for money. You're asking us to put money into it, but there are other organizations in town that when we get together to put together a master plan for that property, there's going to be a lot of information plopping on the table from research that people have done about this. So there's that's kind of the thing that when the city's money gets invested in it, I think that there's a lot of sense for us to get involved because you guys are involved and because we need to show the Coast Guard that this is that we will be able to dispense with this property properly.
We're likely going to be the person that owns this property in the end. We're on a pretty short list of entities that I think would be eligible to take ownership of this property. So it just makes sense for us to be a partner in whoever's talking about it in a serious way. My point of this, trying to suss out where we're going with this, is to make sure everybody has a pretty decent understanding of what they're going to get for their investment. And when it comes to the visioning part of it, I wouldn't expect a really full examination of visioning, but maybe a question that could be answered in this process that would be useful to you is what criteria should there be for considering anybody's use of that property? Like, who would we allow and under what circumstances? What do they have to do? Do they have to preserve it? What does that mean? Maybe that's part of what we learn in a visioning process, and I think that would be worth some investment.
Well, and with our recent money and time spent within our own community visioning, that's a huge thing to help guide some of our city thoughts already. And that's going to sit right in here with it.
Yeah, and I guess where I was asking questions would be, I see this as being farther down the road as that, or than that. Like sussing out what the criteria for selection of projects like that, for that property, like we don't know what the criteria is, and if that's something that we can effectively get from this process, then that's worth $7,500 easy. It's worth twice that. A third, 2/3 of that.
7,500 sounds about right.
Yeah.
But I should have known that was going to come back to me. But I just want to be clear that having that be, I don't think that's what you're asking for. I don't think that this proposal is asking to or offering to give us those criteria. It's offering to create a proposal for the Historical Society for that property. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. But
Well,
No, I think it's a different flavor than where it started from, but I think it fits pretty well with what he's saying he's going to do. And in particular, since not only now they're asking, but in the process, they will be asking about what the city's needs are. If we identify that as one of our needs, we should talk to him about whether
Yeah,
that works.
and I know Dick is more than willing to adapt this proposal to fit whatever you're needing. But obviously still, the Historical Society has its interest in it as well.
Right. Well, and we, totally acknowledge that. Acknowledge that the Historical Society's investment and involvement in that is going to be key to its success no matter what happens. So,
What do you think, Tim?
I think it's worth pointing out in this proposal that the Historical Society is not mentioned except for in the introduction and as a possible stakeholder. I don't feel like it's narrowed down to the Historical Society. I feel like it's fairly broad. I think is that what you were saying, Tracy, is like how it's written?
Yeah, it's written, sounds very broad. You came and made some obviously pointed suggestions why we might be interested in there, but I didn't sense that that's why we're asked to be partners necessarily, nor your suggestions, what your possible needs for it were exactly where we were headed with the written document. So no, it seems pretty broad. And yeah, for the amount of money that's being spent, we're not going to be down in the weeds. It is totally a discovery phase of the whole thing, so.
Well, and the opportunity presents itself for stuff that we didn't even think of, right? I mean, like, it has the opportunity to, if it does, especially if it reaches, into Boulder Park, and, there's, it seems like an interesting, there's a lot of people interested in that. Everybody that lives here is interested in that, so I think it's, I think it'd be interesting to see what they come up with.
and you were saying also, when you said before, you were saying that you're interested in having a proposal that includes Coast Guard Point, like the buildings out there, and that doesn't, that's got the Boulder, so that gives us more opportunities. I think I'm starting to understand more what's going on here. I just want to make sure that I ask the questions, even if they may seem kind of odd at front. I want to make sure I know what we're getting at here.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the fact that the council really hasn't had anything beyond very general conversations about, Coast Guard building, and I think it's very appropriate that the Historical Society has an interest in that building and the future. But as Mike says, it's very, very possible that the city would become the owner of that property should Coast Guard want to abandon it and turn it over to somebody else. While we don't have haven't had a lot of conversation about potential city uses of that property or even adjacent properties or adjoining properties, this certainly could open up that conversation. I think it goes back to that larger conversation of, what's the community interest, and for us to gauge that, we need to have a fuller, more engaging process with stakeholders that might have an interest in that property. So I see a need for a partnership here, but I can tell you right now, I don't feel like the city has any driving desires or interests in that particular property just because we haven't had those conversations. Which this could serve to make more understandable what the city interest might be for that.
Yeah, this conversation really started not with the Coast Guard station, but with the Hammer collection.
Right.
And there was a lot more clear link between some of the things the council's been talking about in terms of needs downtown and the opportunity that finding a place for the Hammer collection has. Now this new wrinkle has come into it and kind of dominates the conversation because of how important a piece of property it is. We should probably still be involved, but it's not, the why isn't as concise as it was before.
Well, I would like to make a motion to approve $7,500 towards the professional fee of this proposal.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
This wasn't in our budget, so obviously we're going to take this out of something.
Yes. So you've got two options. In 2017's budget, you do have a line item called council priorities that
Which this wasn't identified as.
wasn't identified as one. But if you're saying you want to do
Bathrooms
it,
certainly are, and this is part of the bathroom
Yeah.
discussion.
the second is, we haven't had an accounting yet, which we intend to do by the end of the year, of the performance of our enterprises in 2016 and comparison to our budget for them and a decision about what to do with those funds. So that's another potential area.
And so those are areas where we could take that money and wouldn't
Yeah.
affect our overall budget.
Wouldn't.
So with the Historical Society, where will those funds come from the Historical Society? Are you able to get grant funds to be able to pay for your portion, or how does that,
David Hammer is contributing. He understands the importance of getting good planning together, and he's going to be contributing to the planning process.
Okay,
Great.
great, yeah, good to understand that.
Yeah, and I mean, that was one of my questions too, because we are talking, like Anton said, we're talking 30,000 feet here, and so we can put 15 grand into this now in 2017, and this project might not be anywhere near completion by 2020 or something like that, and so like the investment of that money, the actualization on that investment is not going to come for quite some time, and probably won't look like what this comes back and tells us like the ideal is, just because we need to get all the other stakeholders involved, and this is going to start some conversations that are
Well,
going
that's
to
all it's meant to do, right?
Yeah.
It's
well,
not-
I'm just making sure, $7,500 is still a chunk of money, and if we're investing money in it, I think we're going to get some really good information out of it. It's probably worth $7,500 just right there, and and also strengthening the partnership that we have with the Historical Society. I just want to make sure that everybody's got a realistic concept of what this looks like. I mean, obviously, the Historical Society's in it for the long game.
We are a historical society.
Because you are the Historical Society. But
That was
but,
good.
yeah, right? You like what I did there?
That was good.
I could do that sometime. Anyway,
Can't hold it yet.
I know, right? So, any other comments?
Keep us in the loop.
Absolutely.
So it says 4 to 6 months for the time frame.
And is there anything, we'll have to have some contract put in, if there's anything specific that you want added or tweaked in here, I think we should.
Do we want to have city staff, or do we want to have somebody from here? It sounds like there's 4 workshops that are happening under the proposal. Does somebody here want to? I'd do it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, it sounds a lot like the Highway 61,
Well, I don't know. We're not that deep. We're not that sort.
That was, probably a little more focused than this is going to end up.
I mean, I don't, whatever, right? However. you're
but
gonna-
I just assumed
Maybe we don't.
everyone would be there.
No, maybe.
I think it's possible.
Everybody.
I don't think that we're going to skip them as staff. So.
I would be super excited to be.
Okay,
at the-
well,
I was
that's all.
planning on-
I didn't know.
Everybody but certain people with a black hat on.
Jay.
Wait a minute. Are we going there? All right. So, any other
Tease and
discussion?
Is there anything is there anything that we wanted added to it? I'm just really excited to see how, having sat through and participated in a number of visioning processes at this point, I'm just excited to see how another person does it and how that goes. So
Yeah. I think it
no
would
one
be,
else is though. Huh?
I think it would be frugal. I think it'd be frugal for you to invite a number of the nonprofits in town to come and have these conversations too. I think that's going to make your process a lot more robust.
So, am I misunderstanding? Like, I just assumed everyone was invited. Like, is that not?
I think that
yeah.
was my assumption, that's what we've been talking
That's
about.
what I meant by the Highway 61.
Well,
It's
just
like, it's like a big
specific
group
about
of people.
that.
Will there be there?
Well, yeah. Is there food?
Yeah, I mean,
Party
or
set.
forget it.
Nowhere does it say food.
Yeah, maybe we should. Maybe we should
Wait a
add that.
minute.
We'll talk about that.
Let's get
That's
that
on the
written
record.
in.
We can work it out.
All meetings need food.
Okay, so does anybody else have any other conversation on this? Yep. Okay, so keep us in the loop, you know.
You should vote on this.
Yeah, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries. All right, thank you for coming down.
Thanks for
Thank you.
bringing
We
this.
will
Thank you.
continue these conversations.
I think we will.
We
Thanks.
certainly will.
Appreciate it.
As long as they take this long.
Every single time. And as long as we can goof around a little bit. Thanks for coming, Mark.
We're a fun group, aren't we?
You are a fun group.
Well, I don't, yeah, it depends on who you ask.
Over time.
Counting the days.
Yeah, it grows on you, wears on you, I don't know, right?
A little bit of growth.
So,
The next thing.
Hey, well,
there's 3. I've looked at them, I've sent them up to Soil and Water and asked if they wouldn't mind taking a peek at them as well, just to give us their impressions. But now the question is, how do you want to do the evaluation of these? This is our stormwater plan. I don't really have enough information yet to tell you exactly how we're going to pull this project off, because I think the budget needs to be sorted out a little more clearly before we can decide which of these we want to go with.
Did you
Just
send
to
us
give
those?
you no, I did not.
I didn't think so.
I don't want to just send you these things and say read them, because I don't know if you have time to do that. So that's the question of this meeting anyway, is how do you want to evaluate these? Would you like to have them all and read through them? Or do you want to get a staff recommendation and talk to one firm with an idea about scope and budget? Or do you want to do some interviews?
Well, could you meet with Soil and Water and with regard to those, and then bring some kind of a recommendation back? I mean, if, you know, we have three major proposals there to look at, and
Yeah.
they're technical in nature.
Yeah, they're tough. It's,
Can you pass them around right now?
would you like to touch them?
I just want to see.
Yeah.
He wants to look,
It
he's looking at
seems-
that picture there, and he wants to see that picture, right?
There's a lot to dig into. You
I'm
know.
really
It's
interested.
kind of hard to sort out. Plus, the request for proposals we sent out, and with the conversations we had with all these firms, was be prepared to talk to us about scope of work and budget. So, you know, there's a number in here that each of them gave us because we told them to. And there's a work plan that talks about the hours for each task, so we can kind of sort out and, you know, costs for each task. And then there's some discussion about how they intend to do each task. So if we were going to evaluate these, I think we'd look at, do they understand what we're asking for? Do we like their strategy for getting the work done? Do we have any, can we pay for it the way they intend to get it done? And, you know, is there enough information here to kind of sort that out? I think all 3 of these firms will do a fine job, so we got 3 good proposals, and they're, 2 of them are pretty close in cost, and one of them's quite a bit less, and if they're all really good, that might just be the driving factor, but I want to sort through it with soil and water staff and make sure that I have a good understanding of what they're saying too.
Yeah.
I concur with that 100%, that that what we're talking about, you know, it's really important to have soil and
You
water.
just opened up the budget page, that's where that pause came from?
Yeah, that was the budget page.
Couldn't hear that.
Which made me answer my question about how much this one is going to be, looking at the price for the other one.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, it's pretty,
That's the middle one.
it's pretty aware that, I'm pretty aware that the expertise that Soil and Water has is something that we're definitely going to need to make a decision on these sorts of things. I mean, it almost seems like, and I know we hate doing this because it's impossible to schedule, but I think it'd be awesome to sit down, like have the council sit down with some of the members of Soil and Water to look through the proposals together and have, you know, both have them explain something to us and have us pose our questions. But I don't know if that's a waste of time, or if, you know, having these guys talk it over, have staff talk it over, and then bring the proposals back to us would be appropriate.
Well, and part of it, you know, I wouldn't understand all the technical, but I do think it's important to read about the people who plan to be involved in the actual project, and I think that's worth reading through. Their experience, as Sarah, one of them says they've done work here before. This just the whole, where are they doing the work? But I mean,
Yeah.
when was that? Does it matter? You know, the whole thing.
Well,
That matters to me, not just cost, but who are these, you know, what is their real experience in doing this
and this is,
project part of it?
this could be analogous to like having a citywide electrical plan handed to us, right? Like,
Yeah.
how am
Well,
I
there's a-
going to
yeah,
make that
there's-
decision?
There's gonna be a lot of logistics in
Yeah,
this, yeah.
So I think going to soil and water is.
If we could prepare a summary that just talked about what we like about them, and if we could come up with a recommendation for you, that might be easier than expecting you all to go through and like score them with the score sheet, for instance.
Well,
But I'm happy to send them all around if you want
I'd
to.
love to look at all
Just
three,
go
but
through 'em.
yeah.
they'll get there eventually.
I doubt it.
No,
Tip.
I'll tell you, I'm gonna read the whole thing, I'm gonna read the whole thing.
I'm
before.
sorry, you're right, I wasn't even thinking. No, just,
I was not-
they're
I
just
was not
PDFs.
pointing at you.
Yeah, I'll-
That's the picture.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to
That's-
see.
I know you like
This
to
is from the
We'll
picture.
just
Pull it up and read it away.
Yes.
I think I'm interested to read them all. And, I mean, I think just even in the way that they're presented, I mean, I think is important. I mean, so even if we don't understand about like whatever it is in certain stormwater, like the technical aspects of it, to me, I like to see, and I mean, I have no idea, I didn't see what the budget pages are. I have no idea what the dollars we're talking about, but,
Yeah, it's about $50,000 to $100,000.
Sure.
Is the range we're in
For a plan.
for the plan.
Which is not out of the expectation of what we had.
No, but it's still, there were a lot of parts that we talked about using, that, you know, other people's money and our money that we talked about using to budget for this. And I think we need to get back and circle around and confirm that up a little bit too, so we have a better idea of, if we're gonna negotiate with anybody, what our target is.
No, some of this go on, this, I feel really stupid asking this, but is this all part of Highway 61?
We linked it in with that. I don't know if timing-wise they're gonna work, because right now, the state wants to be doing engineering on the stormwater. And although we want to move pretty quickly on this project, and just to give you an idea about what I mean by that, I'd like to be able to say yes to one of these firms in 2 weeks and have them start in October. So
I think that's
they're going to
realistic.
be doing data collection on the ground here in October, November, and then they'll be doing some modeling in the next, 6 weeks after that. Some engagement with the public in the winter, and we expect them to all kind of be done in February with putting the plan together. And here you go, here's our list of recommended things you should work on, and here's your stormwater model, and here's your inventory of all the stormwater features in town.
And that's too late for Highway 61.
It might be too late for Highway 61. It's kind of hard to tell, and maybe we'll know better tomorrow after we do our first meeting with our new project managers for Highway 61.
And assuming you'll bring this up in that meeting, or?
We've already talked
Ask
about
them,
it.
okay, yeah.
So that, I don't know if it fits in anymore. We talked about Highway 61 in our our request for proposals, and we specifically said that we're hoping that they can help us determine if there's anything we need to include in that project to meet any goals. But whether or not in January or February, we still, we're gonna,
I guess what I.
we want to see that done, so I guess it doesn't really matter what the MinDOT's timing is. We want to
Yeah.
see that done.
I was just, I guess what I was hoping for is that you would ask specifically with the new project manager for Highway 61, if
About this.
it was possible to incorporate
Yeah.
this,
Yep.
We can certainly do that.
February or
Yeah,
whatever,
that's-
if that's what you're thinking timeline-wise, but.
I can probably remember that till tomorrow.
Well, we can talk about like what particular pieces they might need information-wise
Yeah.
and timing.
So what do you guys think? Do you think that we turn it over to Mike in Soil and Water to give us some proposals? He'll send them either PDFs out to us so we can look at them. We can create our ideas on it as well. When they get their recommendations, then we can weigh that against our own assessments and then make the decision at the next meeting. Does that sound like that's a robust enough plan, or do you want to handle it some other way?
That'd be fine with me.
Anton?
yeah, it's fine.
Because then we have
Yeah.
two different groups looking at it with fresh eyes, coming together and having a conversation, so.
And
So we're not
you'll get us
necessarily.
all copies too.
Yep, I'll email them around. We're not talking about
There you go, buddy. I was not.
planning on having a conversation with individual firms before you make a decision.
I don't think so.
Because if you want to do that, then you'll need to schedule some time next week, I think.
For us too?
Yeah. I'm not recommending it. I
Right.
just want to make sure that you know that's not going to happen if we don't schedule some time next week.
Do you feel the need to, I mean, do you want to meet with?
No, and I wouldn't be able to anyways next
Oh.
week. So that's, I mean, even if you guys want to do it, like, whatever, but I wouldn't be.
They've got quite a group there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
So, okay, so let's proceed like that. We'll proceed with you and, you guys can
Yep.
talk it over with Soil and Water. We'll look over the proposals ourselves. We'll come back and we'll have a conversation about it. We'll pick someone, potentially have that conversation with them one-on-one, and then we'll move forward on the schedule of getting this done ASAP. Tomorrow we'll talk about this with Minnesota Department of Transportation to make sure they're aware, and that should all lay together pretty well.
It's worth noting, just from interactions we've had as a council with Soil and Water, that I'm, for one, am really impressed with Elena and her crew and just how they operate. And I have a lot of faith and trust in their
And I know that at least two
expertise and their just vision about how things can work, or just flexibility.
at least two of these firms, and maybe all three of them, are either currently working with Cook County Soil and Water or recently did, so that'll help.
Cool, so that works?
Yeah.
All right, so we're moving on to the council and staff report.
Anything to report? I don't think.
No meetings?
Yeah, I've been to some meetings. Just nothing to report. Went to one.
Mr. Mills, you are up.
I don't have a meeting in the Parks and Trails, and Tim has some notes there I saw, and he is the
Yep.
chair, so.
I'll put you on the spot. but-
Oh,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Wait,
See
what?
if you remember.
Oh, a pop quiz?
He does. That's it?
Anton, you up?
Yeah, sure. I think our EDA meeting was before, but the groundbreaking, that's happening. They're clearing up for the North Star.
So a show of hands on who intends to go.
At this point,
All
At
right,
this point.
I'll post it.
Public,
I won't
yeah.
be there, but we'll make sure it's posted.
They have 4 driveways in,
did you
Right
see
now.
those
Do they really?
exchanges
well,
with Ron?
entrances,
Well,
the
So
site's
she's
cleared,
gonna
one
post it?
basement excavated, found a big rock. Yeah.
like a big rock or like bedrock.
I don't know. They pulled out a bunch of boulders in there, could be the top of the boulder, but, or it could be
I was
No.
kind of wondering about
something more.
about the basements the whole time. I kind of wondered about that and how that would work.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
I think
interesting.
generally they're gonna be okay, but.
They did soil borings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for what they're worth.
Cool, well, anything else?
Yeah, just a question. Does Tim, you might know better than Mike, but does the city of Grand Marais have any policy on accessory dwelling units? Do we have
Policy?
anything written
No.
in about it?
Nope.
Are they
What
allowed?
what are you calling an accessory dwelling unit?
A standalone, or it could be attached to, but structure on a residential lot. Like they call them like granny flats.
There's no language
so-
that
so not the-
specifies whether they're allowed or not allowed. People have built garages with apartments included in them, and we have allowed that as an accessory as accessory building.
Yep,
But it's a pretty gray area,
okay.
and one that we probably need to get less gray to
I will send you
address
some
the
information.
visioning.
Can you
it's
send
just-
it to me too? Or send it to him and he'll send it to me?
Yep. No, I think, and I feel like way back, maybe like when I first got on here, like I don't know if I asked the same question or not, and maybe that was probably the same response, right? But I just think of, with the project going up there and some of the opportunities that type of building could fulfill for both housing and, because of because of the way the language is written with the, the prime spots, the commercial zones, below the first block that are available for doing VRBO, or, nightly rentals. Thinking of, I don't know, I mean, I guess I wonder about clarifying that language to me in the, and not as a nightly thing, but as a long-term rental solution, because it seems like it's a continuing issue that is always floating around, like housing and housing and housing. And
Are you
those
suggesting,
small-type buildings.
though, that it's a problem, or is it?
No, I'm
something
saying that it's something that we
should look
we
into.
should clarify language so that if it's, and maybe it sounds like if
Proactive.
people are letting it, you're saying that when people want to do that, it's happened anyways? Like,
It's
what are
awkward. I mean,
what are the
it's-
rules about, like,
yeah,
a septic
that's-
sewer? Like, because some
Yeah.
cities, I guess that was my question, was more the specifics of what, do you have to pay for an extra utility hookup?
Yes.
Do you have to run new sewer and water?
Yes, all those things. And new sewer anyway. Water we're less concerned about, but mostly there's a practice in place that we've done a half dozen or a dozen of these. There's certainly enough that just exist in the city already because those things were built before we ever had a zoning ordinance.
So do you
But
have,
what you're saying is, we should set up rules so it's clear that how we allow these.
right,
Not, that we wouldn't allow them. But
Right.
that we should allow them, and we
Right.
should put rules in place that makes it clear as to how to do it.
right.
I would completely agree with that.
I just think, I just think of the opportunities that would allow for, even for seasonal residents that don't necessarily aren't, it's basically you have somebody that's always kind of keeping an eye on your place without living in your house, it's,
Yeah.
and it would, even if 20 of them got built in 5 years, what that would do to, like, help the rental market in this town. And again, that's all it would be. It would be, because I know also, and I've been reading a bunch about it, more so because I was going to ask this question, but, sometimes it has to be a relative that stays there, and, like, there's different cities have different, like,
Yeah.
really sometimes oddball specifics.
Right.
And the fact that we don't have specifics is great, because then if there is language that, passes, with Chris, and it seems to fit in with what our comprehensive plan is, and fits in with the character and what we are trying to maintain, I guess that's just,
Where it's become complicated ever for us is that, of course, this happened historically throughout the city, that people would have multiple buildings on the property that they own. And then over the course of time, the property gets split up. And there's all these interconnections that people may or may not know about.
Sure.
Utilities wise in particular, but when I'm just gonna build a, cabin in the backyard, I'll never sell it, and then 5 years later, I need to sell it. And then what happens to that lot, and have we created a problem in the future? That's not an insurmountable issue, but that's just the complication that's come up. Otherwise, I feel like this has been something that we have wanted to look at for a while, so.
okay. I'm sure you know about the information too, but there's organizations that just work with cities to try and,
Yeah.
because it was allowed oftentimes, like especially in the early part of the 19th century or 20th century, but then it changed a little bit in
Yeah.
some of the,
Theories
Just
change.
in the
Strictness.
19th century too.
probably.
Well, I don't know that it's ever been prohibited or not allowed. Seems
No,
that
but if-
over the years, there's always been kind of ones that have popped up and have been permitted.
I think if
No.
somebody came right now and said, I want to build a separate structure and it's just going to rent as a separate residence for somebody, that we would say no unless it met some lot coverage setback, like it could be its own lot. And the only time we've said yes is when it's connected to something that makes it clear that it's not its own thing, that it's connected to the building.
Like a garage.
Like an apartment above the garage, for instance.
Well, I have most of the ones that have been built been part of a garage
Yeah.
or a, taking, converting of a garage to a
Right.
residence.
I think that
Garage
that-
has already existed.
I think that statement, I mean, like, that statement and, you know, and that verification speaks to what Anton is, like, the importance of what Anton's asking.
I mean,
you know, to do things.
all I think of is, I mean, if I look at, I don't know, I guess Dave's maybe isn't a good, but
Pretend.
well, if you look at like the more classically laid out lots, right, where they're just the orientation of them, depending on where, you know, you obviously have limitations on height when you're close to the alley because of the setbacks, and you have some of those other factors that they'd probably still have to follow those same rules. But, you know, if I decided to put something up in my backyard that was gonna be that, there's no way you could ever separate that out as a separate piece of property.
Well, actually,
Yeah,
it's
I don't
happened
know.
in my neighborhood,
Yeah,
and I
really?
can think of a mess because, no, it's been done.
Well, then that's even
But then
one
there's,
reason
but
why
there's
we
a
need to
minimum
make it-
lot size. I
we
mean,
need
I
to
guess
make it
that's my
speak.
whole
We
thing.
There's
get
a
a
variance, yeah. You know, the problem is that that's not insurmountable. There's plenty of examples of rules out there we could use to figure it out.
Hmm.
And even if it was still a problem, it might not be as important as just creating more housing units, so.
Well,
I
but
don't think
where do you do that?
What you're talking about isn't
I mean,
trying to.
as accessory.
Oh,
Just
yeah,
accept
right.
the
I mean, that's all-
problems, because
that's
that's
all.
more important.
Right, okay, that's good. I mean,
And it wouldn't, I mean, isn't part of it just saying you
That's
can't divide it, you know, like, this is it? If it's not gonna be something you can,
You can say that, but
For now.
what
A lot of variance.
historical
Like-
mechanism ensures that that happens?
Right.
If it's just in the minutes somewhere, no one will ever remember. A
no,
title
I
search
mean,
will
it's
never
in the,
find it.
that's what I mean, it's in the zoning that you can't.
Rewriting zone.
But you can
But
change
it's-
the zoning.
You can
too.
change the zoning, yeah. So
Like,
even if
it's
we
all-
said you need to put a deed restriction on your property, that this can never be split, well, that's based on the rules today and maybe
Yeah,
the
but
rules in
if
20
you're
years are.
saying your lot sizes have to be a certain size, then you can't, right?
Well, there's a lot of ways we can, I think what the
I mean,
point we're
not to
getting
get into a
to.
big discussion
Yeah,
right now,
but-
but I mean, it's zonable, right? I guess is what I'm
Yeah,
trying to
we
say.
can
Yeah.
we can write zoning to encourage accessory dwellings and discourage the splitting of lots. Like, we can do that. You know, making sure that something is foolproof and like 100% certain is something that we're not gonna be able to do. But I've been thinking about accessory dwellings for a long time, and I'm glad you brought it up. And I think that if we were interested in having that conversation about what, you know, how we would rewrite it to allow accessory dwellings so that it wouldn't change the nature of the residential zone, then, you know, I would be 100% on that conversation. I think
Well,
that's-
just go down the alley between Broadway and First Avenue West above the North Shore building, and, you know, you see what,
There's a number, yeah.
I mean, half the properties have
yeah.
those kind of structures.
What, if you all wanted to do just one concrete thing that would really help us get started on this conversation in the next couple of weeks, find us a planning commissioner.
Oh, really? Still don't have
Still
one.
looking for one, yeah.
It's a fun job.
Yeah.
If you post it on board,
Can I be on it?
We've done a lot of stuff.
Oh, wait.
But what works is asking people.
Yes, face to face.
Yeah.
You know, part of it too, I think, because somebody had some interesting conversations about some other developments that were done for a certain reason. So we think about it now because we're short of housing, and we plan around it that way. So sometimes I think then you have to flip the argument. You know, what would we think about this if all of a sudden that wasn't the issue anymore, and maybe someone said, I can't rent this, and I'm sitting with this building? I mean, then how does our zoning decisions affect, you know, then what would they want to do with
We want to sell it.
that property? Right, I mean, or whatever. I mean, so you can't always make a decision based on all the needs we have right in the immediate. You know, you're saying, yeah, we have this housing shortage, so let's do it this way. Well, what if that's not the issue anymore? It becomes the exact opposite. Then how do we want our zoning to look?
I think that's a great point. I've had similar thoughts, but I also go to like the Go teams, sustainable growth or whatever. They needs to be a town of 5,000 people, and like I forget how many years. It's just like, what? How is that done? And how much housing would that require
I
for
thought
that
they
to
said a
happen?
county of 6,500 actually, so.
Oh, the whole county?
I thought it was a city of 5,000.
Well,
There were a lot
I
of
couldn't-
numbers thrown around, but
Yeah,
I don't
it's-
think.
I mean-
I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
I think,
just
I guess my,
to-
my point on that is because if, I'm hoping that, I'm really interested to see what comes of this stormwater management plan. Maybe that's weird, but the areas that we have that are just sitting there, right? The areas of our residential zone, I always say this, I know you guys are probably sick of hearing it, but the ideas and the cost to the city to try and develop those properties and the return on investment to the current owners, right? The dollars that they get hit with in assessments and what they could return on that, it's just that the math doesn't necessarily work in the current state that things are at. I'm thinking like west of 8th Avenue where it's wet, right? But if you look at it in small scale and density being the key, the solution, you have the opportunity. I mean, you're already living in town. You already have neighbors out your windows. So if we look at it, it puts it kind of onto individuals to be able to look at that as an opportunity versus looking at private development to try and go out and develop, somewhere over on 4th Avenue or, 12th Avenue and 4th Street, right? I mean, where you're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and you still have nothing but raw land and some infrastructure in the ground, right? Versus like, well, I don't know, let's see what it's gonna cost. Or do we have to pay the extra $3,000 in setup fees to the city to hook up? Okay, well, that's one thing, but for $150,000, we can build this 600 square foot small house that is gonna totally fit the need for this, like, the creative, whatever that thing's called, the group that you're working with. I mean, the creative economy, I mean, all these different things that we're trying to, the people that we're trying to bring in, like it, I don't know, I feel like it fills a void in the housing, but it also has the opportunity for income for the owners, and with much less of an outlay for the individual owners. And again, it makes it a more scalable undertaking. Because it's, many individuals could participate versus like, how are we gonna pull together this whole big development to make it worth our while?
Right.
Sure.
Or convince the city to run sewer and water through all that stuff over there, so.
Yeah, so it just, we're supposed to sit down and do zoning with our community visioning, right?
Yeah.
The topic then.
One of the things we've talked about is just the minimum lot size requirements and whether that's, appropriate for the community to require the lot sizes that size to, which in effect creates a density that, seems to be cost prohibitive in terms of opening up new areas for development. Just can't create enough lots on a block to justify it.
You used to have 20, and now you have 10, or about, right, you can get about 10, because if you double
8
up
to
lots.
10.
8 to 10.
Yeah, I mean, you look over in the west side of the city and, yeah, there's five or six houses on a block and.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I'm sorry I brought that up I don't mean to drag it down, but
Hey, don't do it again.
at least I said something.
Good report, thanks.
Yeah,
I'm happy to talk about that. I agree 100%.
cool.
100%. What I heard.
Anything else, Anton?
No,
Jim?
I did bring my notes from the Parks and Trails Commission meeting. We talked a little bit about the Sawtooth Bluffs project and how that's progressing or not progressing, but the first meeting of the steering committee, which is made up of Commissioner Bersheim, David Demmer, Jeff Cadwell, Mike, Dave Kirstig, and Sue Abramson, is set for October 6th, which is going to be the first meeting of anybody that's going to be discussing that. It was talked about early in the conversation about this whole planning process, about this end of February deadline to get this thing done. Now it seems like there's some allowance to expand that deadline to beyond that time period, which I think was is never gonna happen. I mean, I don't see how they ever would have taken a raw piece of land like that and taken all the interest groups and brought them together and come up with something in a matter of, 3 or 4 months, that would have been anything that would have been usable by the community to, bring the city and the county together in a proposal that, we'd be submitting for designation to the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission. So I'm encouraged about the fact that the process is going to start, but also that there's going to be more time available to make that, reflect a good plan. So the other thing they talked about was with regard to the Sawtooth Bluffs, is that the property that private property adjacent to the county-owned land up on the bluff, the county has applied for a grant to acquire that, and it sounds like it very likely that could get funded, and if that was the case, that would also get incorporated into the planning area for the Sawtooth Bluffs. So that decision should be, I don't remember if Lisa said something about when that decision was going to get made, but it seemed to me it was sometime during that planning process, so that
I hope so.
it would be known whether or not that was going to occur.
I thought that wasn't necessarily the case, but that the planning process could include a potential of that happening.
Okay, well, maybe that's how it came to be then, so.
Well, what do your notes say?
Well, my notes don't say anything about it. I thought you had them in your notes. Beyond that, I didn't have anything else. So, there.
Not that you remember right now.
Well, we didn't have a quorum either, so we couldn't
Yeah.
do a lot.
There is a resignation on the commission too. Jody Nonemacher has resigned. Unfortunate, and she's representative of District 2, which is the East Grand Marais, Colville area. So if anybody knows anybody that would be interested in serving on the commission, that would be appointed by the county commissioners, but,
Yeah, have them contact.
yeah.
Tracy?
Nothing, but I will make just one reminder from last week. So when we talked about North House, I know I sat across the table and I looked at Greg, but really all those comments were directed to all of you. Because whatever we decide as a group that we do with that lease, it's what we deliver to Greg. It's not me telling Greg this is what I think we should do. It's our lease. It's the way we draft it. So I maybe looked at him just because he was here, but really that was meant for all of us to consider. And I've had some feedback, and not a lot, but I've had some comments from that since then, just so you know, from people in the community. I think we do need to think about that. And I think you have to remember that when people do their mission as a nonprofit, that's not extra brownie points. So,
Yeah, means they're effective.
well, it means that that's what they're supposed to do, so that's not an extra.
Right?
Right.
It means they're doing what they said they're going to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Well, when we talked about the fact that we'd come up with a formula, to me
Yeah.
that's not a reward when you're simply doing what you're supposed to do, which is kind of, I think what you said as well, Anton, maybe. Had other people mention that to me too. Let me set that.
I think that not to get into that conversation
Yeah,
too
I
much.
just wanted to clarify that little part of it, that, I sat and looked at him, but really,
Yeah, and we're going to be the ones that are in essence going to be drafting that list. So.
yeah, so.
Are you going to give an update on that? Is
There's
there
not
any
really
update?
much to update.
Okay.
That was actually one of the things I was going to talk about. But, so you're done?
Yep. Oh,
Okay.
well.
So first thing, we got our letter from the employees union to schedule negotiations, so that'll start pretty soon. Today I was down at Split Rock Lighthouse for the house bonding tour. So there was about, I would say probably 20 or 25 legislators down there, including Rob Eklund. And we presented, myself, Dave Tiersteg, and Jim Boyd presented the Grand Marais public access project again to them. Got some good feedback. I think that they understood a little bit more. It definitely grabbed a little bit more that we were able to say that we've already got the public works facility basically completed. That really sunk in with them. And that the ask for the project was not a two-phase ask, it was a one-time ask, and that the DNR's involvement in it is very strong. They're the ones who put the plans together. So it seemed like it's got everything lined up pretty nicely. We'll have to see how that shakes out. But it seemed like this time, because we did this for the Senate last year, and it didn't seem like it was as well received by them as it was by the House. So that's very good.
Did Rob have any comments about it at all, or any suggestions on anything that we should be doing differently, or?
Not really, no. There were some suggestions about things that we could do to modify our proposal, such as include information, more specific information about the public works facility, and about the investment that the city's got into it. What's the actual land value of the land that would be used for this project? That information is important to know, like how much we've got into this, and how it just shows that we're very, very interested in having this be a serious project. There were a couple of other things. I put that together in an email that I sent to Mike, so we can have that conversation again.
So you meant to, I think I took that, didn't quite get it first. You mean from them to understand that we've already taken action so we can remove part of what is there?
Yeah, because before the proposal had two phases to it. The first phase was to put in the break wall and the first bunch of parking, and then the second phase, after we had moved the public works facility, was to put in the second batch of parking and then redo all the wetland stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're just asking one time, because we're ready to move.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing that really bit more for them, was that this is not a two-stage project. This is a one-stage project. We've already done the work that we've said we're going to do in order to make this happen. So this is literally a shovel-ready project.
So the $2.1 million covers the whole project from start to finish, the entire site?
Yeah, I think it's 2.3, but
2.3,
we don't really know.
Right.
I mean, that number belongs to the DNR.
Yeah.
That's their number. We're talking with the information that we've been given, but someplace between 2.1 and 2.5 is those are the numbers we're talking about.
When you talk about the value of the property, do we have a dollar amount that we've,
No, we could figure something out, but it wouldn't be an objective number really. But
It'd be really hard to figure something out.
Yeah, it would be.
Priceless.
It kind of is. I mean, if you want to talk about a piece of property that everybody would love to use,
Yeah.
that's the one.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but that was mainly for their information. It wasn't anything that would be, that would be calculated into that deal. It would just be something that they know that we're really serious about this.
Mm-hmm.
But this would be a really good thing.
And
For us
the
to have.
purpose of this group was that this is going to help the House prepare the House bonding bill?
Yes. So the group that was there were people who served on the bonding committee for the House. So I had the opportunity to talk to the chair and the vice chair of the House bonding committee, separately while they were touring Split Rock Lighthouse, and relay to them that this is a big deal. So I feel like it's a good start. It's a good place for us to be at. So
Thanks for going down there.
yeah,
Doing that.
it was it's a long drive for 10 minutes of talking, but you gotta do it. I went to down.
Sorry, what were the other things there?
The only other project that was being presented to them was the Silver Bay Black Beach campground.
How'd that go over?
Oh, I mean, it's a great project. It's a great idea. 63 campsites. Would be a big boon for Silver Bay.
It-
So anyway,
Did they have time to present it all?
yeah, they
Well,
presented, but they also, like, their bus was going to go to Black Beach, so they're actually going to see it. They're gonna get feet in the taconite tailing
The
sand.
tailings.
Right, the
Yes,
tailings.
right in the
The
tailings.
sparkles.
It's super fun.
It's super, yeah, brownfield, I think, but anyway. Anyway.
That doesn't sound better.
No. it doesn't. Anyway, I went to a downtown business meeting. They talked about the summer. They talked about how Fisherman's Picnic went. Definite improvements over past years. Lots of work to do. Lots of good ideas being brought forward about how we can streamline the process with vendors and keep local businesses happy and vibrant on those weekends. It was a good conversation. They're already starting to talk about Moose Madness and talking about the Hygge Festival in the winter, and also Black Friday, Thanksgiving, holiday shopping, shop local type stuff. So it's really nice to have a really engaged population, that's working together with the downtown businesses. It's a valuable group, I think.
Did they give any of their notes and comments back up to the Lions?
Yes. Yep. It's all going to be brought. We're going to do it in two different ways. We're going to go to an Alliance meeting, or a representative of the group is going to go to a Alliance meeting and discuss with them. These are what we thought. We thought it was really great. Thank you so much for letting us be a part. These are the things we noticed, and also to work one-on-one with the Lions and Lionesses to make sure that they feel supported in what the new arrangements are. So I thought that was a really responsible way of going forward with it too.
I just know that they're doing some of that themselves right now, so I was hoping, they get that in now while their group is
Pretty
doing
sure
their
that
thing.
they've reached out, but I can check on that. After our last meeting, Mike met with. I was going to be there, but I had something come up. Mike met with Greg to have preliminary conversations about the North House lease. Many more conversations to come. I don't think anything really was settled in that. Probably some ideas came from it, but nothing that's anywhere near being prepared to share. Correct. Yeah. And then I just had a couple of questions that I wanted to throw out there. Have we heard from the Mason for the poetry walk at all? No. We should follow. Oh, we'll try and figure that out.
We have to put a shout out to him.
We have to badger the masonry company to get the poetry walk put in eventually soon. That'd be super.
How's the time? Can you zoom in on him?
You know who you are.
You all do too.
Please call us.
I'm
We
not gonna watch it, it's
really
all
want to get this done. And then another question. I was at the beginning of the year, I believe we were told that the pond was going to get dredged out in the back, and I don't believe that happened. Am I correct or incorrect?
I don't remember anyone telling anybody that.
I don't remember that.
What pond? I mean, behind
The pond behind
in the
behind
co-op?
behind the
The
co-op.
last of
Oh.
the big swamp.
I remember asking if that was on a schedule of some sort. I believe that the
it's
schedule.
on a schedule of some sort, but I don't know that we know that it was going to be done this summer. But if you'd like to know the schedule, I'm sure Lenny would love to talk to you about it.
I would love to know the schedule for that. I think that's important. And I think it's also really great that, we're doing our stormwater plan when the water level is, 6 inches higher than it has been in most of the recent history. Do you have any comp plan updates for us?
Do you have any comp plan updates for me?
Have you guys been reading the comp plan? I've been working my way through it.
We asked for comments from folks, and probably a couple dozen last Friday. As of last Friday, we've heard from 2. So maybe that was just a suggestion. And I know there's 3 or 4 others that are working on it and will give us some comments. If you intend to do any editing or provide any comments, I guess just let me know. Otherwise, there's going to be at some point, which is probably in the next couple of days, where they're just going to get going on the second draft. And their intention was to have the second draft ready by the end of next week.
I only had one thought, which is in the text. It was more photos that are more timeless.
I had the same comment.
Oh, good, I'm not so weird
Yeah,
then.
if you wouldn't mind just forwarding me those comments via email so that I can send them on directly from your mouth to them, that would be really appreciated.
And the last thing that I have, I got this great letter in the mail from a young man from Webster who said that his sixth grade class are studying Minnesota history, and they all had to choose a city, and he chose, and I quote with capital letters, the great city of Grand Marais. And he would like me to send him artifacts from the great city's past, and photos, information about the economy, employment, parks, churches, climate, tourism, schools, hotels, and restaurants. So he's looking to do a pretty comprehensive summary of the history of Grand Marais here. I should have given this to Carrie when she was in here.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
That
send
in a
them
box, in
over
a
there.
box of rocks.
Or a logging chain.
Or a donut.
Or a bunch
Get
of,
artifact
And that's why you're the mayor.
Right, totally.
yeah,
So-
send them over to the historical, look at all the
Or
great
some
photos
fudge.
and,
That's
Yeah.
fresh, that's fresh, you know.
You can-
there's
you can
no,
mail that.
yeah.
Yeah.
what a
Any-
bunch of YouTube videos. I was busy watching the ones for ham spear.
Okay, anything else? Do you guys have anything?
Well, I've just got this one thing. We received applications for and interviewed for getting some office assistants, and we would recommend that you hire Hayden Hinchman as part-time city secretary. Hayden is currently working at the park office. He's done a great job there, and we're looking forward to having him start.
You need a motion?
Yes.
Also, oh, yeah, second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So what happens over at the park office?
We're talking about that.
Dave was weeping when we
Yeah.
drove
No,
to.
Dave was, of course, highly recommending it. That they're having some staffing issues of their own, which is why he probably won't start tomorrow, but rather we'll ease him in over the next couple of weeks. But their season's over, so and then next summer we'll figure out if there's not some way to share or whether they can make other arrangements.
Now clarify what this position is, because we were
Yeah.
blending things.
So this one is a straight up the same job description that Tina is currently working under. And really the intention is to have this person fill the role that Tina fills for us, or at least part of it, because they're part-time. And have them on now so that they can just help us cover the time in the office that we need covered, because there's only 3 of us
Mhm.
that are all maxed out on vacation, and Tina's retiring in February, so we want this person to kind of get up to speed before Tina leaves, so that there's another person with some kind of knowledge in the office to help us out, and there'll be another 1 or 2 that we'll be bringing to you in the future. The next position we'll try to get hired by the end of the year to help out administratively in the office, and we'll talk more about that later.
And is that the kind of jam public
Not
utilities?
hybrid.
No, it's the one that would be more along the lines of special projects,
Okay,
communications,
okay.
community engagement, stuff.
So
like
what
that.
happens when with the PUC, how are we getting that, how is that gonna be handled?
Well, we're handling it right now.
Yes, I know.
So,
yeah.
but it's just being the work that has to get done is getting done, but we're not really doing everything we want to be doing administratively there. I think that having this person come on board actually helps, because it frees up some of our time to work more on that. But then this next person helps even more, because in particular it'll free up some of my time from some of these other things to work on the management level stuff that's going on in the PUC, the future planning, and that kind of stuff. And then the last position that we bring on would be not just PUC, but also city, to help with some of the more technical stuff that's going on. It doesn't really make sense to necessarily bring that person in now, because we're talking about getting a new utility billing system. We're talking about potentially getting different meters, and it'd be a shame to have to teach somebody that stuff and then 2 months later have to teach them a whole new thing.
Are you that close on the automatic reading?
Yeah, we're talking to vendors right now. It's actually a conversation that's happening in SIMPA, which is why we are not as could have been a lot closer right now, but we kind of stopped talking about it while the group of 18 cities gets together and decides which are the appropriate ways for us to cooperate about this, like bulk purchasing or hosting of software or technical expertise or warehousing of equipment or just any of those things where they might make sense. And that conversation's kind of coming to an end now, where I think the next month the Simple Board will be talking about some of that stuff, and we'll have a better idea of which vendor we should be moving forward with.
Cool.
My dogs will love that.
So the meter readers don't have to
Too.
come. Yeah. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Dave, anything you remembered?
I remember everything.
This meeting is adjourned then.
Quickly.
Thank you. Good night.